That night, I drove my mother away from her $300,000 house in my rattling old sedan, her wedding ring rolling across the floor like dying evidence. He, the man who always preached family is everything, had thrown his fist when I stood blocking the notary's door. And the next morning, he texted, "You're so ungrateful." I thought, fine. If ungrateful means not letting my mother be robbed blind, then I'll be ungrateful to the very end. My name is Ava Whitaker, and at 32, I've seen enough trauma in the ER at Larchmont General to recognize danger patterns, but somehow I missed the ones developing in my mother's own home until that February night when my phone buzzed during a 12-hour shift. The notification came from the doorbell camera I'd installed at Mom's house last Christmas, a gift Carl had called paranoid nonsense. Through the grainy feed, I watched him standing on the porch with a stranger in a cheap suit, both of them measuring the Victorian's facade with their eyes like butchers sizing up meat. The timestamp read 11:47 p.m. "Quick appraisal," I heard Carl say through the speaker. $300K. Maybe $320 if we stage it right. My hands went cold despite the latex gloves. Mom's house, the one Dad left her before cancer took him, wasn't for sale. Or at least, it wasn't supposed to be. The pattern had been building for months. Invisible threads I should have connected sooner. Carl pushing papers across the kitchen table while Mom cooked. His sudden interest in home improvements, despite never fixing the leaking guest bathroom in 5 years. The way he'd started intercepting the mail, claiming he was organizing their finances better. Just a HELOC, he'd insisted at Thanksgiving when I caught him cornering Mom about equity lines. For the roof repairs. "Your mother agrees we need to maintain the property value." Mom had nodded along, the same way she'd nodded through 20 years of his gaslighting. That practiced agreement that meant less consent and more survival. Carl Beaumont had entered our lives when I was 12, right after Dad's death, promising stability and protection. What he delivered instead was a masterclass in psychological control, never enough bruises to photograph. Always enough fear to maintain silence. The ER quieted around 2 a.m., giving me time to dig through my phone. 3 missed calls from Mom, all during Carl's shift at the construction site. She never called during his supposed work hours unless something was wrong. I found her in the break room when she picked up, her voice barely above a whisper. "Honey, I need to ask you something." A pause, the sound of a door closing. "Do you know what a deed transfer is?" My stomach dropped. "Mom, what did Carl ask you to sign?" "Nothing yet." "But there's a folder on his desk, Post-it notes everywhere saying, 'Sign here,' and, 'Ava, there's one that says, 'Don't mention to daughter.'" I pulled up banking apps while she talked, my fingers flying across the screen. 3 credit cards maxed out in Carl's name. A gambling site bookmark I'd discovered last month when fixing their computer. The construction company that barely had contracts but somehow needed constant investment from Mom's savings. "Listen to me," I said, already grabbing my jacket. "Don't sign anything. I'm coming over after my shift." He says the house is really his since he's paid the property taxes all these years. Says I should be grateful. "Mom," I cut her off, recognizing Carl's words coming from her mouth. "The house is in your name. Dad's will was clear. Paying taxes doesn't transfer ownership." By 7 a.m., I was standing in their kitchen, the folder spread across the same table where Carl had terrorized us with his moods for 2 decades. HELOC applications, quitclaim deeds. Power of attorney forms a paper trail of financial abuse waiting for Mom's signature. The refinancing terms were predatory variable rates starting at 12%, balloon payments, and buried in the fine print, an acceleration clause that would let the lender demand full payment practically at will. Carl walked in as I photographed the documents, his face shifting from surprise to rage in seconds. "This is family business," he growled, his construction-weathered hands clenching. "You live in your own apartment now. Act like it. Family." I held up the quitclaim deed. "This would transfer Mom's house entirely to you for $1. That's not family. That's theft." His face went red. That familiar sign that used to send 12-year-old me hiding in my room, but I wasn't 12 anymore. I was a trauma nurse who'd faced down worse than him. That house wouldn't be worth shit without my maintenance, he spat. Your mother owes me. You both do. Everything you have is because I provided stability after your father left you with nothing but debt. The lie was so bold I almost laughed. Dad's life insurance had paid off the house completely. Carl had been living rent-free for 20 years, contributing only to the property taxes while Mom covered everything else from her librarian salary. The appointment at the notary was set for 10 a.m. on a Thursday. Carl had scheduled it during Mom's shift at the library, probably hoping she'd be too rushed to read anything carefully, but I'd taken a personal day, and when I pulled into the strip mall parking lot at 9:45, Carl's pickup was already there, engine running. You don't need to be here, he said through the rolled-down window, his jaw tight. Actually, I do. I helped Mom out of my car, noting how her hands trembled. Any major financial decision should involve family. Right. That's what you always say. Inside the notary's office, I asked to review the documents before signing. The notary, a bored-looking woman named Denise, slid the stack across her desk. Carl's foot started tapping as I read each line aloud. Variable interest rate starting at 11.5%, adjusting monthly based on prime plus 8%. I looked up at Mom. Do you understand what that means? Your payment could double within 6 months. It's just technical stuff, Carl interrupted. The banker said, the banker Mason Kerr. I pulled out my phone, showing the screenshot I'd taken of Mason's real estate license. Your drinking buddy who's been trying to flip houses in this neighborhood. That's when I found it buried on page 12. A power of sale clause that would let Carl sell the house without Mom's consent once the HELOC was active. My vision went red. We're not signing this. I stood, pulling Mom up with me. This is predatory lending combined with elder financial abuse? Elder. Carl laughed, harsh and mocking. Your mother's 58. Not 80. Stop being dramatic. Let's go. Mom. I guided her toward the door. That's when Carl snapped. He grabbed my shoulder in the parking lot, spinning me around so hard I stumbled. You ungrateful little bitch. After everything I've done, I wrenched free. You mean the screaming, the throwing dishes, the time you put your fist through the wall next to Mom's head. His fist connected with my ribs, dropping me to my knees on the asphalt. Mom screamed. Through the pain, I heard car doors slamming, someone yelling to call 911. Carl reached for Mom's purse, trying to grab her ID, shouting about finishing the signing without me. I need those papers signed today. He yanked the purse so hard the strap broke, contents scattering across the pavement. I managed to activate my phone's recording as he continued ranting. That house is mine, 20 years I've invested in it. Your daughter's trying to steal what I've earned. The police arrived within minutes. Someone in the insurance office next door had called. I knew the responding officer, Noah Reed, from numerous ER visits with domestic violence victims. He took one look at me holding my ribs and Carl's knuckles, already swelling, and separated us for statements. At Larchmont General, my colleague, Dr. Patricia Ung, documented everything with clinical precision. Contusions to the 7th and 8th ribs, extensive bruising already forming. The photographs would be date-stamped, officially entered into evidence. You need to file a protective order, Patricia said quietly as she wrapped my ribs. Today. Noah was waiting outside the exam room with the paperwork. I can walk you through the emergency protective order. It'll be temporary 72 hours, but it gives you time to file for a permanent one. Mom sat in the corner, tears streaming down her face. I should have stopped him. I should have... Mom, no. I reached for her hand. This is not your fault. It's never been your fault. That evening, we changed the locks on Mom's house while Carl was at the police station. The locksmith, an older man who'd seen this scenario before, installed deadbolts and security chains without asking questions. I moved Mom's important documents: birth certificate, social security card, the deed to the house into a safety deposit box only she could access. Carl's text messages started at 11 p.m. You're ungrateful, after I raised you. That house would be worth nothing without me. Your mother knows what she owes me. This isn't over. I screenshot each one, building the evidence file that would become my weapon. Because Carl was right about one thing, this wasn't over. But he had no idea what kind of fight he'd just started. In the ER, we have a saying the patient who fights back is the one most likely to survive. And I'd been learning to fight back my whole life, even when I didn't know it. Mom stayed at my apartment that night, wearing my old pajamas, staring at her wedding ring like it was a foreign object. 20 years, she whispered. 20 years of being afraid, and it took him hitting you for me to finally see it. We're going to get through this, I promised, holding the ice pack against my ribs. And he's never going to touch either of us again. Sloan Patel's law office occupied a narrow storefront between a Thai restaurant and a tax preparer. Nothing fancy, but meticulously organized. She'd been recommended by the domestic violence advocate at the hospital, brilliant with financial abuse cases, they'd said. Sitting across from her desk at 8:30 a.m., watching her methodically review the stack of documents I'd brought, I began to understand why. Your stepfather has been building this scheme for months, she said, adjusting her reading glasses. Let me show you what I've found in the public records. She turned her laptop screen toward us. County tax records, deed registrations, a history of LLC formations and dissolutions, all tied to Carl's Social Security number. One address kept appearing Mom's house, used as the registered address for 3 different defunct companies. He's been using your mother's address to establish business credit, Sloan explained. Classic setup for fraud. Create a company, rack up debt, let it fold, repeat. But here's what's interesting. She pulled up a rejected HELOC application from last year. 7 Oaks Bank turned him down when he applied a loan. Bad credit, excessive debt-to-income ratio. That's why he needs your mother to sign? Mom's face went pale. He told me that was for home improvements. Said the bank made a mistake. There's more. Sloan opened another file. Mason Kerr, the supposed banker. He's not employed by 7 Oaks. He's an independent mortgage broker with 2 complaints on file with the state licensing board. Guess who referred both previous victims to him? Carl, I said flatly. They're running a tag team. Carl identifies vulnerable homeowners. Mason processes predatory loans. They split the commission and sometimes the property itself after foreclosure. She showed us a spreadsheet. I found 4 similar cases in the past 3 years. Elderly homeowners, recent widows. Your mother fits the profile. We spent the morning building our counterattack. Sloan drafted a cease and desist letter, a formal complaint to Adult Protective Services, and a motion for an emergency injunction against any property transfers. But we needed more evidence of the conspiracy. I'll call 7 Oaks, I offered. See what they'll tell me as the concerned daughter. The call to Judy Price at 7 Oaks Bank proved illuminating. After explaining the situation, her tone shifted from professional to concerned. I shouldn't say this, Judy said carefully, but we've been watching Mr. Kerr's applications more closely. There's a pattern, and if someone were to file a formal complaint about coercion— She paused. Well, we'd have to freeze any pending applications and review all his previous submissions. How do I file that complaint? Email me what you have. Documentation of threats, evidence of diminished capacity or undue influence. If even half of what you're telling me is true, this HELOC should never have made it past initial review. That afternoon, I compiled everything Carl's text messages, the ER photos, the recorded parking lot assault, Mom's statement about years of financial control. But the real breakthrough came when I checked Carl's company truck's GPS history through the fleet management app I still had access from when I'd helped set up their computer systems last year. Multiple visits to the casino, meeting locations matching Mason's office, and most damning 3 trips to other elderly homeowners' addresses in the past month, all at unusual hours. He's actively hunting new victims, Sloan said when I showed her. This establishes pattern behavior. We decided to be thorough. I pulled Mom's credit report and found inquiries from 5 different lenders in the past 6 months, all unauthorized. Her credit cards had been increased to maximum limits without her knowledge. There was even an attempt to open a business credit line using her social security number. Identity theft on top of everything else, Sloane muttered, adding it to her notes. Your stepfather isn't just greedy, he's desperate. Let me guess, gambling debts. The construction company's bank records, which Mom could access as a listed emergency contact, told the story. Steady decline over 2 years. Contracts lost to legitimate competitors. Employees quitting over bounced paychecks. Carl was drowning, and Mom's house was his life raft. Mason made the mistake of calling Mom's cell that evening while she was with me. I'd coached her to put it on speaker and record. Mrs. Beaumont, we really need to complete this paperwork. Carl says there was a misunderstanding with your daughter. What paperwork exactly? Mom asked, following my script. The HELOC. Of course. Look, between us, Carl needs this money quickly. He's got some pressing obligations, but the house value will cover everything, might even have enough left over for you to take a nice vacation. How much are we talking about? Well, with your equity, we could probably get you approved for $200,000. Carl mentioned you'd only need about $50,000 for the roof, so that leaves plenty for other things. And my daughter doesn't need to know, Mason chuckled. Family finances can be complicated. Sometimes it's better to handle things quietly and tell people after it's done. Less drama that way. I gave Mom a thumbs up. We had him actively counseling concealment and admitting Carl's pressing obligations. Sloane would call this conspiracy to commit fraud. The family meeting Carl orchestrated happened at Aunt Deb's house on a Sunday after church. I wasn't invited, but Mom was, and she texted me from the bathroom as it unfolded. He's telling everyone you're trying to steal my house, she wrote. Says you manipulated me into signing power of attorney to yourself. I hadn't. We'd specifically avoided that to prevent this exact accusation. But Carl was already 3 steps ahead in the smear campaign. By Monday, my phone was buzzing with messages from relatives I hadn't heard from in years. Cousin Jeffrey, who'd borrowed $5,000 from Mom and never paid it back, called me a vulture circling your poor mother. Uncle Rich, Carl's drinking buddy, left a voicemail saying I should be grateful for the man who stepped up when your real father abandoned you. The cruelty of that lie, Dad had died, not left cut deeper than I expected. Carl's construction crew became his personal propaganda unit. They started showing up at Mom's house during the day while she was at work, checking on things and telling neighbors about the ungrateful daughter trying to put poor Carl on the street. Mrs. Henderson from next door actually called Mom to express concern about the situation with Ava. The church was worse. Carl had been playing the devoted husband there for 20 years, teaching Sunday school, organizing charity drives. When Mom and I showed up for Wednesday night service, the whispers followed us like a toxic cloud. Pastor Williams pulled Mom aside to discuss the importance of honoring thy husband and not letting outside influences disrupt a sacred marriage. Outside influences, I interrupted, unable to stay quiet. You mean the daughter who's trying to prevent financial elder abuse? Ava. Pastor Williams's voice carried that patronizing tone I'd heard throughout my childhood. Carl has been a pillar of this congregation. He's concerned about your mother's well-being, especially with you filling her head with these accusations. I pulled out my phone and showed him the photo of my bruised ribs. He did this in a public parking lot because I tried to stop Mom from signing predatory loan documents. Is that the pillar you're defending? His face shifted, but only slightly. Perhaps counseling would help everyone communicate better. Counseling doesn't fix fraud, I said flatly. And it doesn't heal broken ribs. The meeting I organized in response was smaller but more strategic. I invited only Mom's sisters and her 2 closest friends, people who'd known her since before Carl. Sloane came too, bringing her laptop and a presentation that laid out the facts without emotion. This is the HELOC agreement, she explained, projecting it onto my apartment wall. The interest rate would adjust monthly. Starting at 11.5%, it could reach 29% within a year. The average homeowner defaults within 18 months on these terms. But Carl said it was for home repairs, Aunt Marie protested weakly. Here's Carl's credit report, Sloan continued. 97,000 in credit card debt, 3 defaulted business loans, regular cash advances that align with casino visit dates. Does this look like someone preparing to fix a roof? I added the audio recording of Mason admitting Carl's pressing obligations. Then the screenshots of Carl's texts calling me ungrateful while threatening to take everything. Finally, the police report from the parking lot assault, complete with witness statements. The room was quiet when we finished. Aunt Marie was crying silently. Mom's friend Janet looked furious. That bastard, Janet muttered. Lydia, honey, why didn't you tell us? Because I was ashamed, Mom admitted, her voice barely audible. 20 years of my life. I kept thinking if I just tried harder, if I was a better wife. This isn't your fault, Sloan said firmly. Financial abuse often accompanies emotional abuse. The shame and isolation are tools of control. But for every person we convinced, Carl had already poisoned 3 others. His narrative was simpler. More appealing devoted stepfather betrayed by gold-digging daughter. He even started a rumor that I was in debt from gambling a particularly cruel projection and needed Mom's house as collateral for my own loans. The situation escalated when Carl contacted Adult Protective Services himself, filing a report that I was isolating Mom from her family and controlling her finances. The irony was breathtaking. The APS investigator, a tired-looking woman named Pamela Cross, interviewed Mom at my apartment. Your husband seems very concerned, Pamela said carefully. He says you haven't been home in 2 weeks. Because I'm afraid of him, Mom said simply. My daughter isn't holding me. She's protecting me. I showed Pamela our evidence file, the bruising photos, the fraudulent loan documents, the unauthorized credit inquiries. She took notes, her expression growing increasingly grim. I'll need to interview Mr. Beaumont as well, she said finally. But based on what I'm seeing, you're the victim here, Mrs. Carter, not the perpetrator. 7 Oaks Bank, meanwhile, had received our formal complaint, and Judy Price called with an update. We've frozen the HELOC application pending investigation, she said, and between you and me, we're reviewing all of Mason Kerr's previous applications. You're not the first to raise these concerns. But Carl wasn't backing down. If anything, the pressure was making him more desperate. He started showing up at Mom's work, not violating the protective order directly, but sitting in his truck across the street, watching. He sent flying monkeys his crew, church friends, even his sister from Tennessee to convince Mom to come home and work things out. The strategy meeting with Sloan took place in her office at 9 p.m., after her regular clients had gone. She'd spread documents across her conference table like a general planning an invasion. We're fighting on 2 fronts, she explained, highlighting sections of Ohio elder law statutes. Legal and public opinion. Carl's winning the public battle, but that won't matter if we destroy him in court. The legal offensive began immediately. Sloan filed an elder financial exploitation claim with Adult Protective Services, backed by Mom's neuropsychological evaluation that I'd quietly arranged. While Mom was completely competent, the evaluation documented years of sustained emotional abuse and its psychological impact crucial for establishing undue influence. We're also filing for an emergency injunction against any property transfers, Sloan continued, and sending demand letters to both Carl and Mason for attempted fraud, conspiracy, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. What about criminal charges? I asked. That's phase 2. First, we need more evidence of the conspiracy. You mentioned Carl's company truck has GPS. I pulled up the fleet tracking app again. Every movement for the past 6 months. Perfect. Cross-reference those casino visits with ATM withdrawals from your mother's accounts. If we can prove he was gambling with her money. The pattern was damning. Every casino visit preceded by a withdrawal from their joint account. Mom had thought she was funding business expenses. The receipts told a different story. Meanwhile, I implemented the public counteroffensive. Instead of fighting Carl's narrative on Facebook where his construction buddies and church friends dominated, I went direct. I created a detailed timeline document with screenshots, photos, and audio clips, all carefully redacted to protect Mom's privacy while exposing Carl's scheme. The email went to 37 family members and close friends with the subject line, "The truth about Carl Beaumont and my mother's house." I attached Sloane's letterhead to add legal weight. "Before you judge me as ungrateful," I wrote, "please review the attached evidence. This isn't about family drama. It's about preventing a vulnerable woman from losing her home to a gambling addict." Then came the surgical strike on Mason Kerr. I called Judy Price at Seven Oaks and played her the full recording of Mason coaching Mom to hide the HELOC from me. "Jesus Christ," Judy muttered. "He's literally advising concealment of a financial product. That's a federal violation. We could lose our charter if we'd processed this." "Will you testify to that?" "I'll do better. I'm filing a formal complaint with the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, and I'm recommending Seven Oaks ban Mason from all future submissions." Sloane, meanwhile, had discovered something explosive in the public records. "Your stepfather registered an LLC last month," she said, calling me at 11:15 p.m. "Beaumont Property Solutions. Guess who's listed as the registered agent? Mason Kerr. Bingo. And look at this." She sent me a screenshot. They already have a website advertising quick cash for distressed properties. They were planning to flip your mother's house. The smoking gun came from an unexpected source. One of Carl's construction workers, Tommy Olin, reached out through Facebook. He was quitting, he said, and thought I should know something. We met at a diner on Route 30 at 6 a.m. before his shift. Tommy was nervous, constantly checking the parking lot. "Carl's been promising us bonuses for months," he said, sliding a folder across the table. "Said once his property deal went through, we'd all get paid. But last week, when he was drunk, he let something slip." Inside the folder were invoices, fake ones, billing Mom's house address for construction work that never happened. $30,000 in fabricated repairs, all dated within the past year. He was building a paper trail, Tommy explained, to justify taking the house. Said if anyone asked, he'd invested more than half its value in improvements. "Why are you telling me this?" Tommy's jaw tightened. "My mom went through something similar. Her second husband tried to steal her condo. I couldn't help her then, I was just a kid. But maybe I can help your mom now." I had Tommy write out a sworn statement right there, then took him to a notary when they opened at 8. Another piece of evidence for Sloane's growing arsenal. The breakthrough with Mom came that evening. I'd been teaching her about financial independence, how to open her own bank account, change passwords, monitor her credit. For the first time in 20 years, she was taking control. "I want to see a therapist," she announced suddenly. "A real one, not Pastor Williams's marriage counseling." We found Dr. Sarah Kim, who specialized in domestic abuse survivors. After 3 sessions, Mom emerged with clarity I'd never seen before. "He isolated me systematically," she told me one night, reading from her journal. "First from Dad's family, then from my friends, then from you when you started questioning things. The house was the last thing that was truly mine, and he was going to take that too." The public tide began turning when 3 other victims came forward, women from neighboring counties who'd lost their homes to Carl and Mason's scheme. Sloane connected them with a journalist from the Columbus Dispatch who was investigating predatory lending in Ohio. "We're building a RICO case," Sloane explained. "Racketeering, pattern of criminal behavior. This isn't just about your mom anymore, it's about stopping them permanently." Carl's response was predictably aggressive. He hired his own lawyer, some strip mall attorney named Dennis Walsh, who immediately filed countersuits: defamation, alienation of affection, theft of proprietary business information. "He's throwing spaghetti at the wall." Sloane laughed, reviewing the filings. "None of this will stick. But look." She pointed to one paragraph. "He's claiming the house improvements again. Time to deploy Tommy's evidence." The protective order violation happened on a Tuesday at 2:14 a.m. Mom was staying at my apartment. but we'd installed cameras at her house after changing the locks. The motion alert woke me. Carl's truck in the driveway. Carl himself circling the house with a flashlight. Then he did something unexpected. He slipped an envelope under the door and left. By the time police arrived, responding to my call, he was gone. Noah Reed retrieved the envelope wearing gloves. Inside was a typed confession supposedly from Mom, admitting she'd been manipulated by her daughter into false accusations. It was signed with a forgery so bad it looked like Carl had been drunk when he attempted it. "This is witness tampering," Noah said, bagging the evidence, "and violating the protective order. We'll issue a warrant." But Carl had vanished by morning, likely tipped off by someone in his construction crew. His lawyer, Walsh, claimed Carl was on a job site out of state and would respond to the warrant upon return. That's when the real intimidation started. Mom began receiving anonymous letters at work, photos of her taken from a distance, walking to her car, entering the library, shopping for groceries. Each photo had the same message on the back: drop the charges or lose everything. "He's escalating," Sloan said, examining the photos. "This is criminal menacing. We need to—" Her phone rang. Mason Kerr's number. "Put it on speaker," I whispered. "Ms. Patel." Mason's voice was strained. "I want to make a deal. My client Carl, he's willing to walk away from the house entirely if Mrs. Carter drops all charges and signs an NDA. Your client is currently wanted on a warrant," Sloan replied coolly. "And you're potentially complicit in fraud. Why would we deal?" "Because," Mason paused. "Because I have information that could hurt Mrs. Carter's reputation. Photos from compromising situations." My blood went cold. Sloan held up a hand to silence me. "Are you attempting to blackmail my client, Mr. Kerr?" "I'm negotiating. There are photos from a back porch camera showing Mrs. Carter in private moments, changing clothes in what she thought was privacy. My client would hate for these to become public." "Send me proof these exist," Sloan said. "I'll need to verify with my client." An hour later, the email arrived. 3 screenshots from a hidden camera, Mom in her bedroom, visible through the window, timestamps from 6 months ago. My hands shook with rage. "He's been recording her in her own home," I said through gritted teeth. "And he just gave us evidence." Sloan smiled grimly. "Hidden cameras for voyeuristic purposes are a felony in Ohio. Mason just confessed to possession of illegally obtained intimate images." We immediately went to Mom's house with Noah and a detective from the Special Victims Unit. The search was methodical. We found 4 cameras, one in the back porch light fixture, one in a birdhouse facing Mom's bedroom window, one in the garage, and one in a smoke detector in the living room. "The serial numbers," the SVU detective noted, pulling up his tablet. "These were purchased with a credit card. If we can trace them to Carl." I remembered something. "Check his construction company's expense account. He bills everything to the company for tax write-offs." The detective made a call. Within 2 hours, he had the answer. All 4 cameras were purchased on the company card, with receipts submitted for job site security equipment. The invoice showed Carl's signature. "Felony voyeurism," the detective said. "Multiple counts, and using them for extortion upgrades it to federal charges." Carl made his biggest mistake that night. He came to my apartment building at 11:45 p.m., probably thinking he could intimidate me directly, but I'd been expecting him. The moment his truck appeared on the security feed, I called 911 and started recording on my phone. He stood in the parking lot, yelling up at my window, "You've destroyed everything 20 years I invested in that woman, in that house. You ungrateful little bitch. You're going to pay for this." "Carl," I called down, making sure my phone caught everything. "You're violating the protective order. You need to leave. Or what you'll call your cop boyfriend. You think you've won? I know people. That house is mine by rights. Your mother owes me for every year I wasted on her pathetic—" The police sirens cut him off. Carl tried to run, but Noah had positioned units at both exits. They arrested him in front of 12 witnesses, my neighbors who'd come out to watch the drama. At the station, Carl's desperation finally showed. He claimed I'd stolen proprietary business information, that Mom had given consent for the cameras, that the forged confession was Mom's real feelings. Each lie dug him deeper. Mason Kerr folded within hours of Carl's arrest, faced with charges of conspiracy to commit fraud, extortion, and possession of illegal surveillance footage. He agreed to testify against Carl in exchange for a plea deal. Carl promised me 20% of the house's sale value, Mason admitted in his recorded statement. We'd done it before with 3 other properties. Find vulnerable owners, create financial pressure, force a sale below market value. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Deputy DA Patricia Volpe, laid out the charges: elder financial exploitation, fraud, extortion, voyeurism, witness tampering, and violating a protective order, with the RICO enhancement for the pattern of similar crimes. Carl was looking at 15 to 20 years. We're also freezing all his assets, Volpe told us, including his claim to any marital property. The house is protected. Mom filed for divorce the next day, with Sloan handling the civil case alongside the criminal prosecution. The emergency injunction was granted, preventing any property transfers or financial moves without court approval. There's something else, Sloan said as we prepared for trial. Remember those fake invoices Tommy gave us? Turns out Carl used them for insurance fraud too. Claimed storm damage that never happened. That's another federal charge. The trial preparation consumed 3 weeks of 18-hour days. Sloan's conference room became our war room, with evidence boxes labeled and cross-referenced, witness testimonies rehearsed, and every piece of Carl's 20-year pattern documented in excruciating detail. Juries understand stories, not spreadsheets, Sloan explained, arranging our evidence into a narrative timeline. We're going to tell them about a predator who spent 2 decades setting up his final score. The physical evidence was overwhelming. We had the bruising photos from the ER, each injury cataloged with medical precision by Dr. Patricia Ung's testimony. The parking lot security footage showed Carl's assault in crystal clarity, the way he grabbed me, the punch, his attempt to snatch Mom's purse. Even his facial expression was visible, contorted with rage. But the audio evidence was what would bury him. I'd managed to capture 17 minutes of his rant that night at my apartment, every threat and admission recorded in high definition. Sloan played it for Deputy DA Volpe, who actually smiled. He admits to the 20-year investment expectation, Volpe noted. That establishes the financial motive, and when he says, "That house is mine by rights," that's consciousness of guilt. The hidden cameras required special handling. The SVU detective had extracted 6 months of footage before the devices were discovered. Mom had to review it with a victim's advocate present, identifying which recordings showed her in states of undress. 137 instances, the advocate reported, of illegally captured intimate footage. Each one was a separate felony count. We also had Carl's financial pyramid laid bare. Judy Price from Seven Oaks Bank provided a detailed analysis of the HELOC scheme, explaining how the terms were designed to trigger default. Her testimony would establish the predatory lending pattern. In my 23 years of banking, Judy's sworn statement read, "I've never seen terms this egregious outside of illegal loan sharking operations." Mason Kerr, now wearing an ankle monitor and facing his own charges, provided the conspiracy details. His lawyer had negotiated a cooperation agreement that required complete truthfulness. Carl identified the targets. Mason's deposition revealed widows, elderly women, anyone with equity but limited financial literacy. He'd establish control. Then I'd process the papers. We split the commission and sometimes bought the foreclosed properties through shell companies. The 3 previous victims Sloan had found agreed to testify. Margaret Chen, 73, had lost her home of 40 years. Susan Torelli, 68, was forced to move in with her daughter after Carl and Mason's scheme left her bankrupt. Elena Vavra, 71, was still fighting foreclosure. Tommy Olin, Carl's former employee, would testify about the fake invoices. He'd kept copies of everything: receipts for materials never purchased, work orders for jobs never completed, even recordings of Carl bragging about his foolproof paper trail. But the most damaging evidence came from an unexpected source: Carl's own cell phone. When arrested, he'd refused to unlock it, but a warrant compelled access. The forensic extraction revealed everything: text messages to Mason, the old lady signed yet getting pressure from Golden Nugget. Need $50K by Friday or they break my legs. This has to work. If the daughter interferes again, I'll handle her personally. Photos of Mom taken without her knowledge, hundreds of them, some with notes about her daily routines. He'd been stalking her within her own home for years. Gambling apps showing devastating losses: $300,000 over 5 years, mostly from Mom's inheritance and savings, and most damning, a draft email to a hitman website, never sent, pricing out what it would cost to remove an obstacle. The obstacle's description matched me perfectly. This establishes premeditation for potential violence, Volpe said, adding it to the charges. Conspiracy to commit murder for hire, even if not completed, is 25 to life. Sloan organized our evidence into categories: financial fraud, the HELOC documents, predatory terms highlighted, bank statements showing Carl's withdrawals before casino visits, the fake construction invoices, insurance fraud claims, pattern of abuse. 20 years of police reports Mom never filed but wrote and dated, hidden in a safety deposit box. Photos of broken furniture, holes in walls, all time-stamped. Neighbor testimonies about screaming matches. The conspiracy Mason's cooperation agreement and testimony. The 3 previous victims' stories. The LLC formation documents for the property flipping scheme. The escalation protective order violations. The forged confession. The threatening photos sent to Mom's work. The parking lot assault video. Digital evidence, the hidden cameras and voyeuristic recordings, cell phone extractions, GPS data from Carl's truck, the draft hitman email. We need to prepare you both for testimony, Sloan said, turning to Mom and me. Carl's lawyer will try to paint you as gold diggers who manipulated a hard-working man. Let them try, Mom said, her voice steady for the first time in months. I have 20 years of truth to tell. We rehearsed for hours. Sloan played devil's advocate, asking every nasty question Walsh might throw at us. She taught Mom to pause, breathe, and stick to facts. She trained me to control my anger, to let the evidence speak rather than my emotions. Remember, Sloan emphasized, you're not trying to convince Carl or his supporters. You're telling 12 jurors the truth. And the truth, with this much evidence, is undeniable. The final piece fell into place 3 days before trial. The forensic accountant Sloan hired found Carl's hidden offshore account, $50,000 skimmed from the construction company, earmarked as retirement fund. The same account showed regular transfers to online gambling sites. He was stealing from his own business while trying to steal from your mother, the accountant explained. Classic pattern of escalating financial desperation. Volpe added tax evasion to the charges. The night before trial, Mom and I sat in my apartment, boxes of evidence stacked around us like fortress walls. She held Dad's picture, the one from their wedding that Carl had hidden in the garage years ago. Your father would be proud, she said quietly. You fought when I couldn't. You're fighting now, I reminded her. That's what matters. The courtroom was packed at 9 a.m. When the trial began. Carl sat at the defense table in an ill-fitting suit, his face a mask of barely contained rage. His construction crew filled 2 rows behind him, loyal to the end. But the other side told a different story: Mom's library colleagues, neighbors who'd finally understood the truth, and the 3 women who'd lost their homes to Carl's previous schemes. Deputy DA Volpe opened with devastating precision. This isn't a case about family disputes or ungrateful children. This is about a calculated predator who spent 20 years positioning himself to steal a $300,000 house from his victim, a woman he was supposed to protect. She clicked through the evidence on the courtroom monitors. The bruising photos made several jurors wince. The parking lot video played in damning silence, Carl's fist connecting with my ribs, his hands grabbing for Mom's purse, his mouth forming curses we could all read even without sound. Then came the audio. Carl's voice filled the courtroom. "That house is mine by rights. 20 years I invested in that pathetic woman." The jurors' faces hardened with each word. When Mom took the stand, she was transformed. Gone was the cowering woman who'd apologized for existing. She sat straight, spoke clearly, and looked Carl in the eye as she described 2 decades of financial and emotional manipulation. "He isolated me from everyone who might have helped," she testified. "Told me I was too stupid to understand money, too old to attract anyone else, too worthless to deserve my own home. And I believed him, until my daughter showed me the truth." Walsh tried to shake her on cross-examination. "Isn't it true you willingly signed papers before that you trusted your husband with finances?" "I signed what he told me to sign," Mom replied steadily, "because the alternative was days of rage, broken furniture, and threats. That's not consent. That's survival." Mason Kerr's testimony sealed Carl's fate. In exchange for his plea deal, he laid out the entire conspiracy. The jury learned about the 3 previous victims, the shell companies, the commission splits, and Carl's gambling debts to dangerous people. "He was desperate," Mason admitted. "Said if this deal didn't go through, he was a dead man. The casino creditors weren't the patient type." But the moment that destroyed Carl completely came when Volpe played the second audio recording, the one we'd discovered on his phone during forensic extraction. It was Carl talking to someone named Big Eddie, apparently a loan shark. "I'll have your money within the month," Carl's recorded voice promised. "The house is worth $300K, and the old lady's about to sign. Once she does, I can borrow against it immediately, then force a sale. She won't even know until it's done." The jury foreperson actually gasped. I testified last, walking through the timeline methodically. The doorbell camera footage, the discovery of the HELOC papers, the assault in the parking lot, finding the hidden cameras. Each piece of evidence building on the last, creating an undeniable picture of escalating criminal behavior. "The defendant called me ungrateful," I said, looking at the jury. "And maybe I am. I'm ungrateful for 20 years of watching my mother shrink into herself. I'm ungrateful for the violence, the manipulation, the attempted theft. If protecting my mother from a predator makes me ungrateful, I'll wear that label with pride." Walsh's closing argument was desperate, painting Carl as a hard-working man betrayed by a scheming stepdaughter and an ungrateful wife. But the evidence was too overwhelming, the pattern too clear. Volpe's closing was surgical. She walked the jury through each charge, matching it to specific evidence. Financial elder abuse, the HELOC scheme. Assault, the parking lot video. Voyeurism, 137 illegally recorded videos. Extortion, the threatening photos. Conspiracy to commit fraud. Mason's testimony and the phone recordings. The jury deliberated for exactly 3 hours and 47 minutes. "Guilty on all counts." The words rang through the courtroom like church bells. Carl's face went white, then red. He turned to glare at us, mouthing "ungrateful" one last time before the bailiffs approached. But the judge wasn't done. Given the egregious nature of these crimes, particularly the exploitation of a vulnerable victim in a position of trust, and the evidence of plans for potential violence, I'm imposing the maximum sentence on all counts to run consecutively. The math was stunning. Financial elder abuse 10 years, assault 5 years, voyeurism 15 years for the multiple counts, extortion 8 years, conspiracy 12 years, tax evasion 5 years. 55 years total, the judge announced. Plus full restitution to all victims and lifetime restraining orders. Carl exploded. "This is bullshit. That house is mine. I earned it. You're all..." The bailiffs dragged him out mid-sentence, his voice echoing down the courthouse hallway. The last words we heard were "ungrateful bitches" before the door slammed shut. In the hallway afterward, Mom stood taller than I'd seen her in 20 years. The other victims surrounded her, all of them crying and hugging. Margaret Chen would get her house back. The shell company purchase was being reversed as fraudulent. Susan Torelli would receive restitution. Elena Vavra's foreclosure was voided. Mason Kerr got 5 years and lost his broker's license permanently. Carl's construction company was liquidated to pay restitution. The house, Mom's house. Dad's gift to her, was safe. That evening, we changed the locks one more time, just to be sure. Mom moved back in the next week, after we'd had the place professionally swept for any remaining cameras or recording devices. She painted the walls bright yellow, Carl's most hated color. 3 months later, Mom started dating a retired teacher from her book club, someone kind who asked her opinion and actually listened to the answer, someone who'd never once called anyone ungrateful for standing up for themselves. The last text from Carl came from prison 6 months into his sentence, somehow sent through a contraband phone. "You destroyed my life. Ungrateful to the end." I screenshot it and sent it to the prison warden. Carl lost his phone privileges for a year. Mom framed the judge's restraining order and hung it in the hallway where Carl's rules used to be posted. Below it, she added a photo from my college graduation, the one Carl had hidden because I looked too proud. Now we were both proud. Proud and grateful. Grateful we'd fought back. Grateful we'd won. And most of all, grateful that ungrateful had become our badge of honor, not our shame. Thank you for listening to my story. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop a comment below and let's connect. Please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts on this story. Your support means everything, and I'm grateful, truly grateful for each one of you.